lesson 15, client-side development, lesson 15 video. And today we're going to go ahead and be talking about animating with CSS and the canvas. So this is kind of a pretty fun course because you get to move stuff around the screen using animation. So today we're going to talk about how to generate a CSS animation, how CSS animations are different from transitions, and how they're similar. We're going to be creating keyframes, and that's what you use in CSS to do these transitions, to hold and control animations. And finally, we're going to use the HTML canvas element for self-contained animations, but for those that requires using some JavaScript, which we'll talk a little bit about in this lesson. All right, so CSS animation consists of two things, the styles that are animated and the keyframes that indicate the beginning and end states for each animation style. So there are 8 animation properties. You don't have to use all of them, but you do use a good chunk of them. There's a animation delay, there's a direction, duration, iteration count, name, the play state, the timing function, and the fill mode. In our example, we won't be using all of them, but we'll be using the ones that are more often used. So the first thing you have to kind of know is you have to create a keyframe rule. And the rule has a from and a to state, and is one way you can frame the rule. The other way you could do is with percentages, like at what percent of the animation do you want it to do something. That's the way I've done it in my example, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so let's go to animation. So click on an animation here. Now, as you can see, we're animating and we're just going back and forth with this animation here. So how did we go ahead and do that? Let's go to our code. We'll go to the animation, HTML here, and take a look at it. So again, we're just creating a div and giving a class of animated. So in our style, you'll see the animated rule for that class is pretty much set up. Again, it's 100 pixel by 100 pixel div, absolute, color red. And then this is where we give our animation a name. We're not really using this, but we just give it that name. The important thing is the duration of the animation. And, oh, actually the name is important because it's tied to the keyframe up here. So this animation name tells it what keyframe to use for the changes. And then the duration gives it a 4-second duration, and the iteration count, if you put it infinite, it just keeps going and going, and that's what's happening here. And so if we go back here, you'll see it just keeps going and never stops. So that's the infinite iteration count. So the key is the keyframe here. You can see you can do a to or from, or in our case what I did is percentages. The reason I did percentages is because I wanted to go back and forth. So what I did is I said, hey, as part of this animation, change start at the left position at 100 pixels and then move it 500 pixels over that same left position. So that moves it horizontally, but that's at 50%, it moves to the 500, and then at 100% it moves back. So that's what makes it move back and forth. So it moves over to the right and then back to the left once it hits 100%. So if we go over here and look at here, so this total animation takes about 4 seconds. So if we wanted to go by quicker, if we wanted to change the speed of the animation, we can reduce the duration in half. So if we make this seconds. Let's go back here. Now it's moving much faster, as you can see. Okay, so that's the basics of how CSS animations work. You can make an animation repeat. So that's where we had the iteration count to infinite. The direction can take 4 values. Normal, reverse, alternate. I don't think I provided a direction. Yeah, I didn't provide a direction, so it did the default direction, which is normal. I believe normal is the default there. So naming and pausing your animation. So the animation is on the keyframe rule. And with the play state, you can pause and run an animation by changing the play state. The HTML canvas element creates, you can also use, the next thing we'll look at is using the CSS canvas. The HTML canvas element creates a rectangular region on a web page where you can draw anything you like using JavaScript. So you have to use JavaScript to do the drawing, but it gives you a lot of different things. So the first thing you want to start off with is you have to place this canvas element on your web page, and then you give it a size of how big that canvas is going to be. You can give it a border. You give it a black border so you can see where the canvas is. And then there's some JavaScript that you're going to have to write to get the different effects. So this particular JavaScript here, there's 2 variables that you want to use throughout your animation, or at least your manipulation of the canvas. You need to grab the canvas element, and then you need to grab the context. And this context is going to be a 2D context. All right, and then drawing the shapes. Once you have that context element, like we saw on the previous page, then you can call a bunch of different methods on that context element. So to fill a rectangle, you call the fill rect, and that creates a rectangle. Then you can give it a style, so you want to give it a certain number, a certain color. So you can use the RGB, or you can actually give it just indicate what the color is by the name of the color, and that'll work also. If you want to just draw the outline of a square, you can use the stroke rect, and that will just draw the outline without filling it in. So. All right, so let's take a look at how this looks. So this one is using the canvas to draw all these. So the canvas is this rectangular area here. And then we just draw a bunch of shapes. We draw a black square, and then a secondary square where we only draw the outline. And what that gives it a nice 3D effect here. Then we draw a circle, and we use the polygon or the path to draw a triangle. So how do we do that? Let's go to our CSS, and we're going to go back and look at our shapes here, because this has the CSS. And here we just draw, the only thing we ever draw here is the canvas. And then everything is actually done in this shapes.javascript. So I put all of my JavaScript in a separate folder underneath the lesson 15 folder. And this is where all my JavaScript is. And the one for this to create the shapes is this shapes.js. So I'm going to go ahead over here and then just kind of describe. I also put some comments here so you can see exactly what I did here. And the top here, this is where I grab the canvas and the context variables. I initialize those. So I get my canvas, I get the 2D context, and I'm going to use that 2D context to actually draw on the screen. So here I'm using the fill rect to to kind of fill that first rectangle and give it the color blue. I also am use the stroke rect, which just creates that outline that you saw, and that's a little offset. I offset it by 10 pixels each way, but it's the same size, so that gives it that 3D effect that you saw there. And again, it's also, the style is also going to be blue. So the border that it draws, it looks black, but it's really blue. So that's how I drew the rectangles, the two rectangles. So this is the first rectangle. This is the second one that you saw to give that 3D effect. Then you draw a circle. So here you have to use this arc. You have to call this arc function to draw the circle. And then you have to kind of give it a starting point and an ending point. And what you're going to do is you give it, basically you tell it to go 0 to 360 degrees. So the starting point is at 0, the end point is 360 degree. You tell it to draw an arc, so you give it the size of the arc with the starting point and end point. You have to calculate it using pi because it's a circle. And then the last thing you give it is this true. So if I go back here, this was the shape. I believe I have the circle one down here. Which way to draw it? Is it going to be clockwise or counterclockwise? Doesn't really matter. So most of the time you're just going to say true here when you're drawing a circle, etc. Okay. So this gives you the x, y, the radius, etc. So that's what these values are here. So you have the x, the y coordinate of and then the radius. So this is the xy coordinate of the radius of the center of the circle. And then 75 is the radius, how big of a circle the radius of the circle is. Then the starting point of drawing the outside of the arc. And then true, like we said before, is whether you're going clockwise or counterclockwise. If you put false, it becomes counterclockwise. All right, the last shape we're looking at is the triangle. So here, we're going to give it a fill style of green, so it's a green color. We tell it to begin the path, and then the triangle is really just a series of lines. So we say to start at 450x to 75, and then we move the line kind of horizontally. So we do the 3 lines here, and then these are coordinates of the line, and then we close the path. So that says, okay, we're done. And then the closed path draws just the shape. So it'll just draw the borders. And then the fill is what fills in the polygon. So if you look at the triangle, the path, the close just draws the outline, and then the fill fills in the middle. And that'll work with any polygon. Yeah, you can even draw like a star if you want to. You can get very creative with the polygon, with drawing of the polygon. So, and again, this just talks through how to do it. Again, the key thing is you have to begin the path, and then you do your move twos and line twos to create the lines, and then you do the final. You go ahead and you can do a stroke to draw the outline, and then the fill draws the shape. All right. Last thing you want to do is you may want to add an image to a canvas. So let's look at your image. So again, here I just grabbed a random image that we put on here. So for an image, you just have to create a new image variable in JavaScript and then give it the source of the image when you draw it. And then you could draw an image on your canvas. And again, you can use any file. You can use a PNG, JPEG, whatever, to draw the image on there. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Let's go to images here. And then I'm going to go, I need to go, well, let's first look here. First thing I have to do, I have to actually put the image in somewhere on the screen, but basically I give this class to hide it first because I don't want to display it on the screen. I want to just display it in my canvas. So I need the actual image, but I'm going to hide it because I want to actually display it inside my canvas here. So then I create a canvas here. I also have this images that JavaScript, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So let's just go down and see what hidden does. So if you use the rule of display none, you can actually put content on your web page, but then hide it. So anytime you want to hide content, if you set the display to none, it will hide it. It's a nice technique to hide and conceal elements that you don't want the user to see for some reason. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later. Especially with JavaScript, makes it very easy to make elements on your web page appear and disappear. So let's go to images and see how this is drawn out. Again, we get the canvas in the context like we normally do. But this time we're going to go ahead and get that Scream image that's hidden using this get element by ID. So if you notice, the ID on here is called Scream. It's pointing to that to my image. So we need a reference to it in this image, and then we just simply say context.drawImage, then pass it that image variable, and then you give it a size, how big you want to display the image. So this is the width and height, and so we've made it about 50 pixels, and that's about what this is here. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not the width and height, that is the position. I take that back. So this is the X and Y upper left and right coordinates of the of where you want the image to be displayed on the canvas. So so this is the 50 up here, this corner. So it's always going to draw given the upper left-hand corner of the image, where it starts. Okay, so that's the image. Last thing we're going to talk about is animating the canvas. So you can actually do animations with the canvas, but you have to use JavaScript, unlike what we did before with CSS. We'll talk about that a little bit after I do my demo. So let's do the canvas animation. So here we just have a circle that we drew, and we're moving it infinitely across. Now, for JavaScript, because it's programming and you have to work with pixels and things like that, there's definitely some more math involved. That you have calculations you have to do. So that's kind of the part that makes probably using the JavaScript a little bit more difficult, but not too difficult. So let's go ahead and look at the animation here, the canvas animation. All right, so again, we start with canvas, same canvas, but we use our different JavaScript, which is animation.js. We see a lot of the same things when we're using the canvas. We have to get a reference to the canvas and then to the context, because the context really does all the work. And then we have to set some variables, so that's what I mean with things are a little more complicated when you're using canvas animation because you have to use JavaScript to animate the canvas. So you give it the coordinate of 0, you tell it where to start x, y's, and then you give it a radius of 50 and a speed of 5. So the first thing you have to do is you want to go ahead and have this function to draw your circle. So you want to clear, have this clear rectangle that kind of clears the whole thing. So basically, what it does is it just kind of redraws the whole thing. It makes it blank, makes your canvas blank by doing this clear rect. So this is a good way to just blank out the canvas between each iteration, because you have to do that every time to kind of erase where the circle was before you go ahead and draw it again. All right, and then this is just typical begin path. You're going to use the arc, so you use the canvas height divided by 2. You're going to give it the radius, which is 50, so that's why the size of the circles, the radius is 50. And then you give it the 0 to pi times 2 to draw the circle. And then you fill it with blue, fill it, and then you close the path. So that draws the circle. So what's happening here is this update method gets called, and it basically just kind of keeps running in this loop. And I'll show you how the loop keeps running. So first thing we always do is we increase the speed, and then we check to see if the x-coordinate is greater than the canvas width plus the radius. If it is greater, that means it's off the screen. And then what we should do is we should actually go back. Right? So we set the x equals to the negative of the radius, so it moves it all the way back. And then, so once we have the new coordinates, when we set the new x coordinate of the circle, we draw the circle again, so that clears the old circle and draws a new one. And then this one is an interesting one. What this does is this is a special method that JavaScript has that basically requests the animation frame and then runs it. You basically tell it what function to run every time. So in this case, we're telling it to run, to do the update again. So it goes ahead and gets whatever the animation frame that the browser says. So it doesn't run too fast. It kind of automatically puts a nice little delay in there for you that makes sense for your animation. So that's kind of the key of what keeps calling. So basically this update just keeps getting called over and over again, and this request animation frame controls when it gets called again. So that's why you have this nice smooth animation going on here. Okay, so the big question, if we go down to our last here, is how do you choose between which animation to use? Do you use CSS? Do you use Canvas? Obviously, CSS is easier to implement because all you have to do is give it a bunch of rules and kind of set it up with that keyframe. So it's really easy for non-programmer to use CSS animation rather than Canvas animation. Again, Canvas animation requires you to code in JavaScript, but you can do a lot more with the JavaScript. So it's definitely a lot more it has a lot more flexibility, let's say. Okay, so I think that's all we have for lesson 15. Thanks again for joining us, and we will talk again later at the next lesson. Thanks.